Hello once again, it's Matthew here from matthewnorthmusic. Thank you for watching this video. And if you do like these videos that I make, which are broadly based on music, retro technology, old computers, and occasionally I post the odd song as well, then please think about hitting the subscribe button. It's completely free. And if you click on the little bell icon as well, you'll then be notified on videos that are coming out and new stuff that's coming along. And I'm not one of these YouTube channels that charges people for content. I know you can have this sort of club things and whatever, but I don't do that. I just make videos and I hope that you enjoy them. Anyway, today is a very iconic day, really. It's the 40th anniversary of this album, which is now That's What I Call Music, the very first one. Now, I have so many memories of this time because I kind of consider that this era, and particularly the year that followed, 1984, for me is the greatest year of music, the greatest year of pop music. And I'm almost thinking that next year I might do a week by week or a fortnight by fortnight sort of video series about 1984, because I think so much happened in that year. I'd really like to have a go at trying to document it. I've always fancied writing a book on the subject, but me and writing it's never really worked. But making a video series about it, I think, you know, could be fun, and you never know, I might even get to do a few interviews along the way. But yeah, now That's What I Call Music. Now, there's been a lot of interest in this in the media recently, and I even saw a news piece about this on television today. And a lot of people say that, you know, these were the first compilations and every compilation before that was rubbish. Now, I kind of don't hold with that, and I'll give you an example. These albums here, Chart Hits 81, Part 1 and Part 2. This was my first pop compilation that I owned of current music. Now, I had compilations as well that were older, that were like second hand, but this was the first new one, and my grandfather bought me a copy of this in 1981 from Woolworths in Dartmouth. And they had this thing where, you know, buy this record, you know, buy volume 2, get volume 1, 3, and on this one it says buy volume 1, get volume 2, 3. Now, this was quite a common ruse in the 80s, and it wasn't just for compilation albums. I've got an album called Life in the Jungle by the Shadows, and that had a buy one get one free album with it, and it had a Live at Abbey Road album with it, and various other albums came out in this format. Now, this album has 19 tracks on each disc, so that's a lot of songs, 38 tracks. But the downside of these records were that to get that number of songs on a single side of a disc, something has to give, and two things give with these type of records. The first thing is they would often edit the tracks and make them a little bit shorter to fit on the record. But also, when they cut the disc, and by cutting the disc, when they actually make the master record, if you want the record to sound loud and punchy, you need a wider groove. The wider the groove on a record, the louder it is. And on these, to fit the number of tracks on, they had to master them quite quiet, so you get more surface noise and they don't sound as punchy or as loud. Having said that, I've never had a problem with the sound quality of these records, but I've been listening to these albums since 1981, so I've had these for 42 years. But with today's listening and comparing them to CDs and stuff, yeah, you do see the flaws in these records. But having said that, to do two records, and I think these retailed at $5.99, I think they did a reasonable job. And as I say, these were done by K-Tel, and K-Tel and Ronco were the two big players in the UK as far as a lot of products are concerned. I mean, every Christmas, you know, this time of the year, you would see Ronco products advertised on television every Christmas. In fact, I can show you a couple. because Ronco made things like this, the Ronco record vacuum. Now this was you put a record inside it, and after you washed it, it would spin round and it would clean. Now I'm going to make a video about this at some point. I haven't done it yet, but well, it's just something I always saw on telly, and I managed to pick one up. And this was something else Ronco made, the Ronco roller measure. Now this is like a tape measure that goes on the end of a stick. Now I can actually take it out of the box and show you. So there's your tape measure, and it's got a little number on it, and you slot it together on like a stick somehow. And yeah, and you can use it for like measuring your ceiling and stuff. But these companies also made cassettes and records, and this is one of them. This was called Chart Trek, so it was a bit of a pun on Star Trek, and it had what, 20 tracks on each, so 40 songs, quite a lot of tracks. And you had, you know, pretty good artists on there: Tears for Fears, Dance Society, Blancmange, Marilyn, Paul Young, Wham, Lotus Eaters, you know, Kissing the Pink, all good stuff. And these would retail at like $5.99. I actually got these from a discount shop near where I live called Trago Mills. And like about 6 months to a year after these came out, they were knocking these out at 99 pence each. So that's where they came from. And some other ones that I got in a similar way. This is another Ronco set. This is Chartbusters 82. And again, it was a double cassette set. Also came out on record, and it had people like Gary Newman, Pigbag, Bow Wow Wow, The Associates, Adamant. So yeah, you know, actually a little bit alternative on that one. And this one's got, you know, ABBA, Flock of Seagulls, Dollar, Haircut 100. But then it's got some obscure tracks that you've never heard of. Like there's a song on here called Your Honour by Pluto. I mean, I've never heard of them. You know, they're on this tape, but that's it. And what used to happen was, if you were a record company and you wanted to produce a compilation album, and say you wanted, I don't know, Paul Young. Now, Paul Young signed to CBS at the time and said, yeah, I want Wherever I Let My Hat by Paul Young. And they'll say, yeah, sure, you can have that track, but you've got to have this other song as well. Now, I don't know if they were on CBS or not, but for example, if Pluto had been on CBS, then they might have said, yeah, you got to put this Pluto song on your compilation as well. Now, the reason for that is because by putting a track that flopped or an unknown track on a compilation, if these compilations sold, say, 500,000 copies, which it wouldn't be unusual for a compilation to sell that kind of number, that's 500,000 lots of royalties that they would have been able to claw back from the sale of these compilations. So it was a good way for record companies to get their money back. And staying with kind of the space theme, this is the Ronco set, and this was called Chart Encounters of the Third Kind. So again, it's a double set using a space pun, because in the early 80s, Star Wars, Star Trek, Close Encounters, science fiction was a big thing. So so they used that as a way of selling cassettes. So anyway, you know, the idea of these albums is not new. It's been around for a long time. But the thing with the Now album it's the way it was made. It's only got 30 tracks, so that means they can master them properly, have the full-length song, and they'd sound a lot louder. But it's also the packaging, because instead of it being a buy one LP, get one free, they made it as a double album. And these are really nicely packaged. You know, you've got a photo of every artist on the front, and you've got, you know, details about each track on the actual cover. You know, you can look at, say, Down Under by Men at Work. It tells you this chart position, and it tells you the album it came off, and there's a photograph of them. So they've kind of given you, it's almost like Wikipedia on a record sleeve. And I think that's one of the main draws as to why these were so successful. But honestly, you just look at the track listing on this album. You know, Phil Collins' You Can't Hurry Love is a massive song. Is There Something What I Should Know by Duran Duran? Massive. Red, Red Wine by UB40. But then you get a Limahl song, Only for Love. Now, I don't remember that ever being in the charts. But at the same time, you've got Too Shy by Kajagoogoo on here. Now, this is a really weird thing because you've actually got two Kajagoogoo songs on here. You've got Too Shy and you've got Big Apple. Now, again, I don't know for sure, but if the record company, and I'm pretty sure Kajagoogoo were signed to EMI, and these albums were made as a partnership between EMI and Virgin. So I think by stuffing on Kajagoogoo, because the band had kind of almost split up by this point, it was a last minute way of clawing back some of that money and shoving on a Limahl song, who was probably also signed to EMI at the time. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he was. It meant they could recoup, because then you've got all these other big hits like Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler, Karma Chameleon by Culture Club, Moonlight Shadow by Mike Oldfield, Down Under by Men at Work, Paul Young's Wherever Lay My Hat, Human League, Fascination, Howard Jones' new song, not Howard James. If you know me, you know who Howard James is. And it's even got Genesis, The Cure. I mean, it's just a great compilation. And the fact that by then, a few months later, releasing the sort of the follow-up, Now 2, what that did is it set it as a series. And that's the crucial thing, because if you've bought the first album and you buy the second album, what are you going to do next? You're going to buy the third album. And that is why it's such a successful brand, because back in the 80s, people collected things. They like to own things. And if it's a series, you don't want to miss out. So as soon as these came out, people would just go out and buy them. And again, you know, it's a slightly different cover design and it's got less photos, but the Now is, you know, it's like they know what their brand is. And again, you know, it's a nicely packaged album, absolutely crammed with songs. I mean, you know, you kick off with Radio Gaga by Queen, and then you've got Frankie Goes to Hollywood, you've got Eurythmics, you've got things like Cyndi Lauper's Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Nana's 99 Red Balloons. There's a few obscure tracks on here, like Snowy White's Bird of Paradise, but it's a great song. It is a great song. Reflex, The Politics of Dancing. That's another absolute classic. I play that song every time I DJ. But then, you know, things like Breaking Down Sugar Samba by Julia and Company. Don't think that was ever a hit. It's a good song, but it was never a hit. Not that I remember anyway, but they stuck it on here. Again, that's one of those tracks that they stuck on here so that they would be allowed then to recoup and put other artists on. Now, like I said, I'm a big fan of these. You know, I've got them on vinyl, or the first few on vinyl. I've even got them on cassette. That's the first one on cassette. That's the second one on cassette. And as I say, I've always believed that 1984 is the greatest year of pop music. And, you know, these albums, this is volume 3. And again, it's just full of huge numbers. Duran Duran's The Reflex, Nick Kershaw's I Won't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, OMD's Locomotion, Howard Jones's Pearl in the Shell, and Phil Collins' Against the Odds. All massive songs, and they're all some of the songs that are on side 1 of this LP. And in today's world, do the Now albums have a relevance? And my view is this: it's not the sort of music I listen to, current pop music. In fact, I always make a joke that when the Now albums got into double figures, then, you know, it was all over for me. Although, in truth, actually, I'm really up to Now 5 is probably what I would listen to these days. But it's about quality of sound. And let me explain. So much of the charts now is based on streaming or MP3 downloads. And The sound quality of those tracks are compromised because they're compressed, and in essence about 80% of the actual sound is thrown away and you just hear bits of the sound. And the thing is, if you buy a Now album on CD, it's one of the only ways that you will be able to get those songs in full quality, in full uncompressed digital quality, with no artifacts and no compression. So if you are a fan of pop music, particularly if, say, you're a DJ as well or something like that, then by having the Now albums, you've got those songs in arguably the best sound quality you can get, and certainly the best sound quality for the money. And this is the thing with the Now albums, you know, we've got here, what is it, 30 odd tracks? Yeah, 30 tracks on an album that this one cost £6.45. It's still got its Woolworths RM price ticket on it, £6.45. In fact, I think this one's probably even got a Woolworths sticker on the inside, because they always, there we go. So you go inside there, there's always like a little Woolworths sticker inside, which I think it indicates the week it came out. Or so yeah, store number 32, October 1984 was when that went into stock. Now, that's 30 songs on there. Now, if you were to have bought those songs on single back in the day, you'd have paid between about £1.20 and £1.50 per single. So you're looking 45 quid to get the songs that are on here that cost £6.45. So that is a huge saving of money. And, you know, and whereas in that era, singles were massive sellers. I mean, you know, you only got to look at something like Last Christmas by Wham that did like 1 million copies, never got to number one because of Band-Aid, but it still sold 1 million. I mean, these are huge numbers. So if you were a music buyer and you want those songs, it was the perfect way to buy those records, because you had all the hits you wanted in one place in good sound quality, and it didn't break the bank. And that was, I think, the key to the success of the Now albums, that they were in a series and that they, you know, the sound quality was good, the manufacturing was good. I mean, I think these were all pressed by EMI at Hayes, so you know, it was good stuff. Now, they had a competition, they had a rival, and it was the Hits album, and this is the first one in the series. I've got a few of these. The Hits franchise also had them in these double cassette boxes that look like this, which I always thought were really cool. I like the way they opened up like this. And these were basically the boxes that computer games used to come in, and they just used them in music as well. And there's Hits 2 in the same style. Now, they did also do these in sort of double side cases like the Now albums as well, but I always thought those looked better myself. And the Hits album was kind of CBS's kind of deal, saying, well, we're going to kind of do the same thing. So they had stuff from CBS and Warner Brothers. So some of the artists that you wouldn't get on Now albums, like, for example, Prince, would be on these instead. And honestly, if you look at the track listing on Now One, I mean, you've got, you know, the first track is Freedom by Wham. You've got Paul Young, you've got Alison Moyet, you've got Laura Branigan, you've got Ghostbusters, you've got Michael Jackson, you've got George Michael, Thompson Twins, Stranglers, Chaka Khan, Prince, ZZ Top, Van Halen, Adamant, Meatloaf, and then some artists that were on both, like Rod Stewart, and in fact Thompson Twins I think are on here as well. So, you know, they was spread around with the two versions, but the Hit series didn't last that long. I think towards the end of the 80s they were kind of gone. Whereas the Now, I mean, Now are well into over 100 albums now, and I think they're one of the brands that I think will help keep the physical media of CDs alive, because people like them on CD. Because I think they stopped making Now albums on vinyl, I think round about number 38, 39, kind of in that ballpark. So there's been another 60, 70 albums after that have only been available on double CD. And so people will just carry on buying them. So I think even if CD sales really plummet to nothing, they'll still be making Now albums. In fact, I went to a supermarket today and they don't have many CDs, although interestingly they had the new Beatles single in there as well as the new Red and the Blue albums. But they always have the latest Now albums, being the standard series or the yearbook albums that they've been doing, that have been they've been a really nice set as well. And so I think, you know, physical media, I don't think it's ever going to die. I think everyone's saying CDs are over. I think the sales hit as low as they could get, but I think they're kind of coming back a little bit. And certainly the prices of CDs, if you go into the major record shops now, CDs are certainly more expensive now than they were 5 or 6 years ago, which makes me think they're starting to become a premium product like they were in the 80s and like vinyl became in the last 10 years. But the difference is now that vinyl is so expensive, you know, an ordinary LP, 40, 50 quid. In fact, even some of the things like they've done some of the Now albums, the Now yearbooks as sort of 4 LP sets, and they are just so expensive. Anyway, this isn't really a talk about, this is a talk about honouring the fact that there has been no album in history that has carried on like Now. You know, Now is now, as a friend of mine posted on Facebook, Now's become middle-aged, it's now 40 years old. And I can't think of a series of records that has even lasted 10 years, to be honest. I mean, there were various things like the history of rock that I did a video about a little while ago, but that only went on for 4 or 5 years. But Now has carried on, and Now will never stop. Unless music stops, I can't see Now ever stopping. So, like I say, it's a great institution, if you like. And, you know, I fully admire people that still buy the Now albums and listen to them and collect them. I mean, as I said, for me, my interest in pop music I kind of lost that towards the end of the 80s, really. I liked other music, and some of that appeared on the Now albums and the hits albums. I mean, even bands like the Sisters of Mercy appeared on one of those hits compilations. But I can remember when I first saw one of these. I'll quickly tell you this. I was at a party of a friend of my parents, and their kids were friends of mine, and they had a copy of this. And I remember looking at it thinking, this is great. You know, these are really, really good tracks on here. And I think they just bought Now 2. I think that had just come out, and they had it at this party as well. And as soon as I saw the track listing on Now 2, I immediately, the next week, went out and bought a copy, because it was just like, oh yeah, I've got to have this. And I didn't get Now 1 until a few months later, when I actually managed to buy this second-hand copy on cassette, which I think I got from like Newton Abbot Market or something. And even though it was fairly new, I think as things were, but everyone wanted whatever was new, and people would like probably bought Now 2 and then decided to sell their copy of Now 1 because it was now seen as out of date or something. But, anyway, happy days of record collecting. I hope this video has maybe jogged a few memories, or you might find it interesting. And again, if you do, please think about liking and subscribing, and I'll catch you on the next one.